A country of 500,000 people beat the reigning European champions without scoring a single goal. Not once, not by accident. They did it on purpose, and they did it on the biggest stage in sports. Cape Verde, 10 volcanic islands off the coast of Senegal, smaller in population than most American college towns, and in the summer of 2026, they walked into the World Cup and refused to lose. Here's the part almost nobody talks about. This never happens without a single boring-sounding decision made years earlier in a FIFA boardroom. A decision about math, about how many teams get invited to the party. Stick around, because by the end of this, you'll understand exactly how a nation smaller than most zip codes ended up standing toe-to-toe with Lionel Messi's Argentina. Let's back up. For almost a century, the World Cup let in 32 teams. That sounds like a lot until you realize Africa, a continent of over 1 billion people, only got 5 spots. 5 for 54 countries. Cape Verde tried to qualify 7 separate times. 7, and 7 times they came up short. Not because they were bad, because the door was just too narrow. Then FIFA changed the math. In 2026, the World Cup expanded to 48 teams, and Africa's allocation jumped from 5 spots to 9, plus a shot at a 10th through a playoff. That's not a small tweak. That's almost doubling the number of doors into the building. Here's the interesting part. Cape Verde didn't just squeeze through a wider door, they dominated it. They won their qualifying group outright, finishing ahead of Cameroon, a team that had been to the World Cup 8 times before. Cape Verde had been 0. In theory, that shouldn't happen, a nation with no World Cup history beating a continental heavyweight to the punch. In reality, it happened because the format finally gave a small, well-organized team enough games to prove itself over a full season instead of one bad night ending the dream. And that's where most people get confused about why this format change actually mattered. More teams doesn't just mean more countries show up. It means smaller federations get real seasons, real momentum, real chances to build something instead of gambling everything on a single knockout match against a giant. Cape Verde built something. Now here's the part that gets almost unbelievable. Getting to the World Cup was supposed to be the whole achievement. Everyone expected them to lose 3 group games and go home with a nice story. Pretty clever underdog run, everyone says, and moves on. That's not what happened. Their first match was against Spain, the reigning European champions, a team stacked with some of the best attacking talent on the planet. Spain fired shot after shot, over 20 dozen of them by the final whistle, and Cape Verde's goalkeeper, a 39-year-old veteran everyone just calls Vozinha, stood in that net and said no, again and again and again. Final score? 0-0. That's actually insane if you think about it. A goalkeeper old enough to have a kid in college standing between the smallest football nation at the tournament and one of the biggest and simply refusing to blink. Then they drew Uruguay, 2-time world champions, in a wild back-and-forth match that ended 2-2. Then they held Saudi Arabia scoreless too. 3 games, 0 losses, and somehow that was enough to send Cape Verde into the knockout rounds as the smallest nation by population to ever reach that stage in World Cup history. You know the type of team that's supposed to fold in this spot. Cape Verde wasn't that type. So why does a tiny island nation keep producing players who can compete with the best in the world? Here's the twist most people miss. Cape Verde's national team barely runs on players who grew up on the islands. Their roster is built from the diaspora, players born and developed in Portugal, France, the Netherlands, all with Cape Verdean roots, all choosing to play for the flag of their parents or grandparents instead of the country where they trained. At first, this sounds like cheating the system. It isn't. Nearly every small football nation does some version of this now. What made Cape Verde different is how deliberately they built it, scouting the diaspora for over a decade under one coach, Pedro Leito Brito, known simply as Bubista, who had been shaping this exact plan since 2020. This wasn't luck, it was a slow, patient blueprint that finally had the right stage to play out on. So let's connect the dots. A rule set expanded from 32 to 48 teams. That gave Africa almost double the qualifying spots. That gave a small, well-run federation enough games to prove itself over a real campaign, instead of one unlucky night ending the dream. And that federation had been spending years quietly building a diaspora-powered roster, just waiting for the door to open wide enough to walk through. Take away any one of those pieces, and this story doesn't exist. No format change, and Cape Verde is still stuck outside looking in for the 8th straight cycle. No diaspora strategy, and the extra spot goes to waste. No Vozinha standing on his line against Spain's 27 shots, and the whole run ends in the group stage like everyone expected. It took all of it, lined up perfectly, for a country smaller than most cities to become the biggest story of the tournament. So here's the question worth sitting with. FIFA didn't expand the World Cup because they wanted more underdog stories. They expanded it because more games means more broadcasts, more money. But sometimes the side effect of a business decision is a 39-year-old goalkeeper making the entire world stop and watch a nation of 500,000 people refuse to go home. Maybe that's the real lesson here. Sometimes the biggest miracles in sports aren't about talent at all. They're about somebody, somewhere, finally getting invited to play. If you enjoyed this, subscribe for more stories like this one.